Welcome to the Layman Seminary. Today's a special edition. We have Josh with us. Y'all know him from previous videos and stuff. He's also on the board of the Layman Seminary. In fact, he's been here since before the Layman Seminary started. He's going to be leaving for Korea, and he's been here about 7 years. And so I want him to share his journey both from salvation forward and all of that, so that we can see what God has been doing in his life. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so like I already said, I'm headed off to Korea. I'm going to be doing some things over there for about a
It's
year.
classified.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, really, my Christ, Christian faith started at a really early age.
Okay.
There's never been a point in time where I've not been out of the church. My parents were active in the church even before I was born. So when I was born, it was just we went to church. Um, but I came into a relationship with Jesus Christ in about the third grade, and it was a result of the my parents had pulled me out of public school and was homeschooling me at that time, and they had chosen a Becca homeschooling program to curriculum to teach me with, and a lot of the different lessons would involve, especially like the reading portion of the curriculum would involve, reading the Bible or reading a book of Bible stories like Noah, Jonah, Moses, those types of Ten Commandments, those types of things. I remember asking my mom, really how do you get saved? Like, how do you know you're going to go to heaven? So my mom in our front room, on next to our couch, led me to the Lord, or led me really into a relationship with Jesus Christ. So that began it, and we. I'll say this much: my parents didn't necessarily hold to a particular denomination, so we went to several different denominations growing up as a kid. I had attended Methodists and Baptists, mainly Bible churches though. Went to two different Bible churches, but Baptist and Bible churches were probably the main denomination that my parents attended. Um, a lot of my early theological training came from my mom. She really tried to do that as best she could, in the sense that she would always point me to Chuck Swindoll's ministry and really the different like study books that he produces. Uh, that was kind of like my training and equipping as a young man. Um, but around 14 years old, when my freshman year of high school, I was given an opportunity by the interim youth pastor at the time to preach at our. We would do a monthly Sunday afternoon worship service / little sermonette for the. There was a nursing home for the elderly, and so he asked me, "Hey, you want to do the sermonette?" And I was like, "Sure." And at the time, I thought, how a pastor or somebody that prepares for those types of things is, you went and Googled your sermon topic, and then you found the Bible verses that supported what you wanted to
Sadly,
say.
there's a lot of pastors that do it that way.
So I remember preaching that God is light, and it's He illuminates things, and I still remember this today, but he's still the pastor of the church that we were attending. But from the pulpit, pastor asked me in front of everybody, how did it go? And he even mentioned what I preached on, and it was almost an affirmation for
Okay.
me that like because I had felt drawn to doing something with ministry.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, very, I guess you could say, very naively, I was like, well, maybe I'll be a pastor, and so there was that. But through a series of events, post after my freshman year of high school up to my senior year, um, different events occurred that kind of drove me to uh, the Air Force, and so right after I graduated high school, I I went and worked for a tool and die company for a year, and then but in that process I realized the Air Force was calling me, and I think in essence I think God also was directing me to go there. Sometimes like Moses when he killed a guy and tried to settle the next day to settle a dispute with his fellow countrymen, and they were like, "Well, who are you? You know, you killed a guy. You gonna kill us too?" Whereas Moses went off for 40 years. You know, after that, I really think that that was kind of, you know, I did something like that. Let me put it to you that way, where there was a sense where I tried to, um, you know, do the Christian way or live the Christian life how Moses thought at the time. You know, I'm going to do it like this, and that's not how God wants us to live it, right? And so I think, you know, I had a period of time, about 4.5 years, as my early Air Force career before I came here to Janley Baptist Church. That, you know, there was training and equipping going on because I was attending church, but there really wasn't a depth to it. It was more of I was regularly attending. I was, you know, somewhat being nourished from the pulpit. But I met my wife, and during that time period, and so, you know, we had kids really early, and there was a thought, you know, how can, and with my particular job, I deploy a lot. It's a lot of gone for 6 months, home for 6 months, turn right back around and gone. So she asked, you know, how could I secure, you know, at least for their early childhood, you know, that early age where they don't really understand why dad's gone. Is there a way that we could, you know, keep you here? And I said, yes, there is. And so I volunteered to be a teacher for my job. And so we moved here to Texas, North Texas, up here in Wichita Falls area. And so tried out a couple different churches before we, in October of 2013, we attended Janley. And it was really, interestingly enough, it was my coworker's daughter who had came to the youth group at the time with Elijah Meyer. And she was like, yeah, that's really nice youth pastor there. And really, you know, it seems like a pretty cool church. And so I was like, well, let's go try it. And that Sunday morning we walked into what is the front door of our church, but it's kind of a confusing setup. We didn't know we were supposed to get out in the fellowship hall area, and so you have like me and my wife and 2 kids at the time, just kind of aimlessly standing in our lobby area. And I don't exactly remember who was like, you're obviously new and you don't know where you're going. So they took us down to, at the time, Robert and Debbie Ritter were teaching our class, and
1 second, Josh.
Yeah.
Can you scoot over this
Sure
way?
can.
No, this way. This way.
Sorry.
Come back this way. That way, Janet, you know, she wants to see, you know, her pictures in her background. Oh, the marriage pictures. I'm just saying.
Okay.
You don't got to be immediately right up on me. I'm just saying.
Sorry, my guys. Is that good?
I'm just saying. My wife is the director, and she will freak out if you know.
Okay. Sorry, Janet. My bad. I was not trying to block you out. You were very important to both me and Charles.
Okay, so
more important to Charles, but you know.
Yes, absolutely. So you're in the lobby.
Yeah. So we're in the lobby, and we get directed, and that's when I met this young man, and just really impressed me with the maturity as far as, you know, in the Christian faith and his knowledge. And we became regular attenders, and I remember telling Lacey when we left the parking lot we left church that day, and I was like, you know, I was really just impressed, and she was too. And so I said, well, let's just keep going back, and so we did. And really within a year, I think it was, that they asked me to teach Sunday school out at the youth, just Sunday school, you know.
You were the substitute youth minister on Sundays, right?
No, no, not a substitute. It became a full-time thing, because we were trying to.
Because Elijah was coming into my class,
Correct.
And I was training him for his mission trip and stuff like that.
Absolutely, and then from there, when Elijah got married and moved with his wife up in Oklahoma, they asked me, hey, would you like to take the pastoral job? And I really began to see God moving. You know, God refining my skills and noticing, you know, that about 14 years later that I began to understand that, you know, God doesn't, you know, God has plans for your life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we tend to, you know, do things to complicate them, or make us feel unworthy of what God has called us to do in that sense. But he began making it very clear that he wanted me in ministry again. And through that process of being the youth pastor at the church, I did that for a couple of years. I recognized that my training, though we were doing very well with our training, because during that time from when we first showed up in October of 13 until roughly November of 2015, you know, Charlie and I did a lot of Bible studies together. We were reading through Reign of the Servant Kings with
Final Destiny.
Final Destiny. Thank you.
The
updated version with Norman Geisler.
No, that's Dillo.
Dillo. Sorry.
Chosen but free.
Chosen but yes. Thank you. Sorry. So Dillo.
It's early in the morning.
Yeah, and you know, if any of you the scholars are watching this, my bad. My apologies.
No scholars were offended during the making.
Hopefully not. Yeah, you know, he introduced me into Constable's Notes. A lot of you know, Dallas and Schaefer and different seminarians that and scholars that, you know, really helped build up the free grace theology. You know, and in that, I didn't know that I was free grace before I was free grace. I held a free grace view. It was just Charlie began to expose me to some of the things that where Chuck Swindoll, a lot of his teachings came from. You know, who was the guy that wrote Not by Bread Alone?
Waterhouse?
No, not Waterhouse. I'm sorry. It wasn't Not by Bread Alone. It was
Basic Theology.
No, sir. It was the observation BOA method.
Living by the Book.
Yes, Living
Hendricks.
by the Book. Hendricks. You know, Hendricks really had a big influence on Chuck Swindoll's life, and Chuck Swindoll had a huge influence on my life. So through
books and stuff,
through books, right?
But you went to his church a few times, you know, and stuff like that, right?
Well, we only went once.
Oh, okay.
It was right after my youngest daughter was born, down in Fort Worth, that I wanted to go.
Well, he's like one of my Facebook friends, so maybe he'll see this.
Good.
Shout out.
Yeah, and I did get to go down and shake his hand, you know, and I did tell him that he had a huge impact on my life as a young man. So, and you know, teenager, young guy. And so, you know, and so I started attending seminary in the fall of 2018, or excuse me, fall of 2017.
17.
Yep, 2017, September 17. I went to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and you know, I appreciate them. I would still be going there, but there was I can appreciate the fact that they want to maintain a level of independence from any type of tuition assistance from Uncle Sam, because there are restrictions that come along with that. And I was using, but in my case, when you're active duty military and you try to use advantage of your veteran benefits, they fine you heavily. And so I decided to switch over to Liberty University, and I've been attending there ever since. So around the spring semester of 2019 is when I switched over, and so I've been going there ever since, and I've just learned a lot, and even throughout all of the, you know, the being the youth pastor, going to seminary, you know, Charles has been, you know, one of my closest confidants, and just great mentorship. And where he's mentored me in the faith, I've been able to mentor him in other areas as well. So it's you know, very very close friendship, best friends, I would say. What did you say, Dr. Dre and Eminem?
Yeah,
that's how you described it.
Yeah, because I mean, that's how I think of one of my mentors. He was Dr. Dre, and so I was Eminem. But so you know.
Continuing the illustration.
We got a 50 Cent in there somewhere.
Wow.
But
yeah, I mean, that was my story. I mean, so, you know, I knew that I was saved, and even when I, you know, I was talking about that period of time where, you know, post freshman year, up into even into my Air Force, where there was a time like Moses where he went into Midian, right?
Yeah.
And you know, there was a you know, when you begin to focus on yourself, you begin to have a lot of self-doubt about who you are as a child of God. Who, what are you supposed to be doing? All of that, and by large, it's because of sin.
Mm-hmm.
When you live a life apart from the vine, right? We think of John 14. When you
15.
15.
Yeah.
And when you try to live disconnected from the vine, it's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
You dry up. There's no real joy in life. It's constant hardship. And when you get hit with trial after trial after trial, it's your own strength quickly wanes. And so there was a sense that when I had shown up to Jan Lee, spiritually as well as emotionally, I was just very low in dealing with a lot of issues in life. And it was this church, and it was you, Charlie, that really began to help develop me and my wife and my kids to understand the importance of staying connected to the vine, recognizing the importance of daily confession of sin. That RB theme rebound technique that really, the 10 steps problem solving devices. When you really begin to understand that, that even in the Christian life, just like a basketball player, you're going to miss shots, and the importance of rebounding the ball in that particular illustration. And the same is true in life. And so when I got here, my family situation and everything, it was a unique time. And now where I'm at now, it's having the tools that have been daily equipped. Of course, me and Charlie have hung out. There's never been a week that we have not hung out.
Yeah.
Unless I was, TDY or I was, on extended leave. Obviously, there was that 40-day period I was stuck in West Virginia. But like I said, over the last 6.5 years, there's never been really a week that we hasn't gone by. The discipleship hasn't been occurring as part of life. Like we'll invite Charlie over to, I got 3 daughters, so they'll watch a movie. We now have Disney Plus, but we'll invite them over, we'll watch a movie, and then when the kids go to bed, or sometimes the kids are still up, depending on when we started the movie. It's Charlie and I will we'll do pick out like theme material, or Constable's notes, or the living by the book, or we'll do, or just the Bible, Deuteronomy chapter 6. We did a bubble,
we help each other through seminary.
Yeah, this really has been him more than me help him, but it's been more of this direction. There was a sense of definitely just a lot of growth in the last 6.5 years. And, our church is really trying to do that, right? Trying to build this, this type of, this idea, right? Where you have
the organic,
this
organic discipleship.
Correct. And I'll tell you this much, it's something it was really interesting. I just went to a field training exercise down in Florida, and on my way down there, I sat next to a young lady. I want to say young lady, she's 6 years older than I am, but she, what I thought was going to be a 2-hour boring flight turned into, I never would have thought of this. Had it not been for the discipleship that we have been doing over the last 16 years, I never would have tried to get the conversation to go into Christ. And it did fairly quickly. Within about 15, 20 minutes, we began having a conversation about our faiths.
I haven't even heard this story yet.
Oh, yeah. So well, I this obviously, is an interview. I'm not,
right. I got you.
We can go into it a little later, but, just that conversation that I had with her, I probably never would have had that type of conversation. I probably would have just went to sleep. Honestly, I just would have.
Yeah, it's important to talk to people on planes. That's how Janet, my wife, came to salvation. Was her the guy that became her pastor at some point? He evangelized her on the plane.
Absolutely. Come to find out, she's this young.
I guess you call that fly-by-night evangelism.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so this I really begin to I feel, because of what Charles has done in my life, that I'm more equipped to be able to, and not perfectly. Obviously, there's still a lot of work. I think every Christian, doesn't matter what age you are, there's still always work to, there's still always growth to do.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as time change, one thing I've noticed is that the 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 illustrations that you use, you have to change them up. Sometimes it's funny when our pastor he'll ask us in the audience, "Do I know this? We know this person?" I'm like, "Well, raise your hand if you know who this is." Like 2 people actually will raise their hands. And he always makes more. And yes, when you're old, or outdated. So in that sense, we're always growing to be able to reach the next generation of people. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was because of Jan Lee, it was because of Charles that I began to see what my gifts are. I began to understand from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 7 through 13 that, God has given each Christian a gift at birth, or gifts, one of the two.
And at the new birth.
At the new birth.
Not
Yes,
at birth.
yes, not at physical, not at leaving the womb birth, but new birth, Holy Spirit indwelling in you. Absolutely. I do want to make that clear. And that in order to properly, in order for you to function, the church to function, each person is to exercise their gifts according to what God has gifted them. And so I began to realize that, it's not just about showing up to church so that way you and your family can live a good life or somehow be blessed because of what, I'm going to church so God will bless me, but rather I'm going to church so I can exercise these gifts. And as I be obedient to, what God has called us to do, the blessings flow. I was reading in Deuteronomy chapter 4, just this idea of, if you obey me, you get blessed. And there is the rehashing of the law. And so it was just kind of, this is the type of relationship they have. And what made me think of that lady on the plane was, there are certain, I think that God has called everybody to be a mentor for somebody. You're not to mentor everybody, but but you may have an impact. And I think with Charlie,
divine appointment.
Yes, and I think that there was definitely, and it was like I said, we walked out of church that Sunday morning, and I was like, Charlie just impressed me, and my wife and I had a very long conversation that day about it, and it just felt very. I don't want to sound too charismatic here, but it just felt very drawn, right, to come back and to learn. I really felt like there was a wealth of knowledge that I had never ran into before, and so, and my wife did too, right? And she recognized that, and over the years we've just have grown dramatically because of this relationship that was built. And it started slow, just like any relationship does. It wasn't like you were coming over to my house day one, right? But over the times, we became best friends, and you're now my kids' uncle, even though not by birth, right? You're not my brother. But there is a sense that it happened, and I began to realize that with this lady on the plane, that not everybody is going to, I'm not going to impact, in essence, I'm not going to be everybody's mentor, but I do need to find somebody that wants to be mentored, first of all, by me, and then pick them up and do this organic relationship. I need to be, and my eyes need to be open to that, right? And that I need to be, as I'm dealing with these relationships, that's what we're thinking about. Okay, is this person somebody I should be pouring into? Is this person open to me? Right? Because if they're not open, but they want to be mentored, they may be somebody else. God may be saying, it's not you. It's this person needs to be over here, right? Because our gifts line up, right? And so God recognized that and was like, okay, Charlie, I need you to prepare this young, up and coming minister, right? I need you to do that, and you were very faithful in doing that. Whereas, like, somebody else maybe, for example, my wife could mentor and train somebody that's up and coming, maybe in hospitality or in one of her gifts, if that makes sense. And so I really began to see that paying attention to your gifting and finding people that are like gifted to get mentored and trained by them, so you can exercise the gift that God gave you within the body and the context of the church. So, and it was through that conversation with that lady on the plane that I began to kind of understand that and see that. So,
Okay, you mentioned, and thanks, Josh. We're going to peel back the layers now. Ready?
mm-hmm.
All right. You mentioned when you came to that our church, you had 2 daughters.
Yep.
But there was actually a 3rd daughter that was there as well. Where was she?
Well, she was conceived shortly before attending JLBC, sometime about early October.
So she was in her mother's stomach.
She was in the mother's womb at the time, like the size of like my pinky nail when we showed up to JLBC. Nothing but a clump of cells at that moment.
So y'all knew she was there, right?
I think so. If I'm not mistaken, I think we had just found out through the natural way of all women find out that they are pregnant. You know, we hadn't taken any we had not been to a doctor, you know, with the ultrasound to hear the heartbeat or anything like that. But Lacey definitely had we did the stick test, you know, as well as just the natural growth phenomenon that all women experience when they become pregnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we were growing another human being, and when I say we, I had no process in that. I make the same mistake that I think it's funny when guys say, "Yeah, my wife and I are having a kid." No, your wife is having the kid. You guys together made the kid, but
you both share the medical bills.
Yes, that's true. So, yeah.
Okay, so you going back, talk about that dynamic that existed in that group whenever you first came to JLBC in that Sunday school group.
So there was a lot more, I would say, adults. When I say young adults, there was a lot 35 age and younger. Okay. My wife and I were the youngest couple in the room. We were in our early 20s. I was 24. Let's see, I'm trying to do the math. I was roughly 24, 25 years old when I showed up. Okay, I'm 30 years. I had to have been 24 because I'm 30 now. So I was 24 years old, and there was a lot of adults, and at various maturity levels within that.
But the oldest, even at that time, at that particular class,
late 40s,
not counting Robert and Debbie, mid 40s.
Mid 40s, yep.
Yeah.
And so, but so you have this.
I was 32 at the time.
Yep.
38 now. So.
Yep. And so you have this this really strong, I would say, Sunday school group, and what my wife and I didn't know, right, was the importance of this group, and the importance, that JLBC would play in my life, in a particular growth, not just in discipleship and the more academic side of our Christian faith, but also in the emotional and the other aspects of our faith, right? Mm-hmm. The prepping for dealing with different trials and testing and those types of things. Because on March 21st of 2014, my wife and I found out that our potentially new daughter that we were going to be having was going to be born with a rare cardiac disease called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And so that was on March 14th, we found out there was an issue, but we didn't know what it was. And then on March 21st, so exactly a week later, we were given the actual diagnosis. And we were told at the time that Molly had a 50-50 chance at living, right? She could live, both, she could either die or she could live. It was very, equally split. But we went back 2 weeks later and we were told it was more of an 80-20, 80% chance she was going to die, 20% chance she was going to live. And so we were given some options. We could have done this very rare and risky procedure where they shove a needle through my wife's stomach and into the through the sac and into my through the stomach, through the sac, through my daughter's chest, into a heart valve, which is the size of about 3 millimeters. You had to go to Boston in order to do it, or down in Houston, and that it could have caused my wife into labor and just have the baby and she would have died. We elected not to do it. We really trusted that God, if Molly was going to live or die, was based on what his divine appointment, not ours. And so on June 11th of 2014, my daughter Molly was born. First couple of days of her life were pretty touch and go. I mean, there was At one point, I remember the second night we were in the hospital, they told us if she lives, it's because God and Molly decided that she's going to live. We've done everything medically we can do to to help her live, right? But there's nothing else medically we can do. And when your daughter's intensive care doctor is crying, she's telling you this, it kind of puts it into perspective that yeah, she's pretty serious. Um, but fast forward 6 years later, and 3 open heart surgeries. Day she was born, 4 months old, and at 3 years old. Multiple other surgeries in between all of those. A life flight from here to Fort Worth. My youngest is very much alive and well, and I very much attribute that to God's sovereignty. There's, it's. I feel immensely blessed that He chose in His own sovereignty to allow Molly to live. There was most babies or most children that are born with this disease don't make it. They either die because of the condition that they have, or that condition creates other conditions in which they die of. So I can't but help but feel thankful every day when I see my daughter, and where she's at, and whenever every day is a gift when it comes to her and all my kids, really. I mean, it just made me more appreciative of life in general, for what God's done and blessed me with in my wife and my faith, and that in and of itself greatly encouraged us to continue to move forward. That God spared us from the agony and the grief that comes with the loss of a child. And I can't speak for God as why He chose Molly to live and not die. I can just be grateful, and I can accept that He sovereignly chose that, and to not waste the opportunity that that God gave us, my wife and I.
Amen. Okay, so talking about, let's talk a little bit about how whenever y'all were dealing with we're dealing with this reality of Molly, about the healing issue.
Yeah.
Your perspective on healing, how God worked that out, how the church helped, how the church helped during that process, and also how it related to your spiritual growth and how it tied to your career. I mean, how do you see all that woven together there?
All right, so there was a lot there, and I'll do the best I can to remember it all, so you may have to kind of help me.
No problem.
Keep it all together. So, from a healing standpoint, my wife's underpinnings, from of her faith, were a little bit more charismatic, in the sense that if your child or something happened, it was because of sin, something related to a sin. And it was same with me, even though I grew up in more of a traditional Baptist Bible church, like I said. Anytime something happened, it was a result of sin. Had it been sin caused, something that you did something to cause this. And what we found is when we went in and we took a look at John chapter, I think it's 7 or
9, about the
9,
man born
blind, right? And the apostles asked that question to Jesus: whose sin was it? Was it his parents' mom's sin, or was it his dad's sin? And Jesus says neither. It was so that way the Son of God may be glorified, be able to demonstrate a good work, right? And so when I begin to realize that yes, cardiac diseases and these types of things is a result of the fall of sin from Adam and Eve way back in the day, and the progressive the humanity marching towards the end times in Revelation. There is that sense that it's sin related, right? In that sense, but it's that's the overarching theme for all of humanity, big general scheme. But specifically in my life, it wasn't necessarily because of any particular sin. It was that so God could, I have the privilege now of standing on, and looking back, right, 6.5 years later, I have that privilege. But at the time I trusted Him, it began to say, are you going to trust me even with your daughter's life? That was the question. Are you going to do it? Are you going to try and solve this on your own? Because when you're given the answer that you can't put a band-aid on this boo-boo and it just heal. Like, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And as a father, right, you want to take care of your children, you want to provide for your children, you want to protect your children. Even as a mother, even more so, right? And the whole idea of that being ripped out of your hands, so to speak, you're not given the option. There is no, it's not up to you whether your daughter lives or dies.
I just realized I'm going to interview Lacey while
Oh.
you're gone. Get ready, Lacey.
Yeah,
right. Oh, that's great.
Absolutely. So we're told that the only way that this issue can be taken care of, and side note, it's not officially taken care of. The doctor simply they didn't heal my daughter. They bought her 30 plus years, potentially, of life. She will ultimately need a heart transplant. That's the only real way of actually curing this disease, right? But that comes with other complications and medications and those types of things. Um, so so that as a father, right, I can't fix that. That's not something dad and mom can fix, and so you have to really just lay it at God's feet and say, and let him decide what is going to happen or not, and trust him with that decision. Now you might say, well, Josh, your daughter's healed. I'd stand on the other end of that pericope and think, oh yeah, I'd be more trustworthy than God too. I don't. I can't say whether or not, for sure, right? Had it went the other way, what would have happened? I would like to think that, it would have helped grow my faith too. But I just trust that God, in his sovereignty, obviously, since he is God and he's perfect and he makes the best decisions, that this was already predestined to occur, and it was predestined for a reason. Um, and specifically, I don't know how many people, I can't really say for sure right off the top of my head, but my daughter has impacted numerous lives, just with her story. Some people don't even know her personally, but just the story of what she's had has strengthened other people's faith. And I'm going to go back to what, Jesus said, this was for the glory of God.
Amen.
Obviously, God, this way forward was going to bring him the most glory than the other way. And I would say that to those that are watching with, pain or hurt, from the loss of a child, I feel for you. And I would pray that, that God just comfort you, and just be with you. And, I've not been there personally, but I've been at the edge where the possibility was real. I know how scary it is, and I know that it was hurtful. To just trust God in that decision, it's hard. So my heart grieves with you. If you're watching this and you're going through something like that, absolutely. I just leave a comment, and we'll definitely pray for you. I mean, I know that it's tough. So,
amen. So talk about the role of the church in helping you through all that.
So, I remember we on March 21st was a Friday, so March 23rd was a Sunday, and we now everybody knew from the previous Sunday, March 20th or March 10th, excuse me. Let me do my dates here: 14, 15, 16. March 16th was a Sunday, and everybody knew we were going down to Fort Worth that Friday. We asked for prayer requests and those types of things. And so on Sunday morning, they asked how the doctor's appointment went. And of course, you can imagine two parents being told that your daughter is going, has a great chance of dying.
Mm-hmm.
It was very emotional. I just remember breaking down and just sobbing. I couldn't stop crying. I just, and even on the way home on that Friday afternoon, there was just a lot of crying. And my kids were much younger. They were only 3 and 1 at the time. They were almost 4 and 2. And, they were very confused. Why is mom and dad crying all the time? Why are they just randomly crying on their own? And, so that Sunday was a very emotional Sunday for us, but the church was there. I mean, just the prayer teams and the requests from other churches, right? To the people that they knew, from other churches they've been at, they would, hey, we have this family that's praying, or that has this, child, that's an unborn child with rare cardiac disease. Would you pray for even my own family and the churches that they go to or that they know? But specifically with Jan Lee, what was interesting was there were several women in the church, or husband and wife couples too, that had lost a child, and they knew what it was like, and to see where they were at spiritually, right? That it wasn't that okay, if Molly goes to heaven, right? She dies and she goes to heaven. That we can still stand on the promises that, where's Molly gonna go?
Mm-hmm.
She's gonna be with God, perfectly whole, right? No,
Mm-hmm.
no more pain, no more crying. So when we saw these, like Mary Messenger, that could, that had dealt with it, that had lived it through the loss of a child.
Dr. Williams.
Dr. Williams.
Rick Griffin.
Yep. And now their children were older, but still they lost a child. One was in his early 20s when he passed away, and then the other one was like really early, 5 or less. But they all had been through that grief and that pain, and just the level of support.
And they weren't even in the Sunday school class. These are people from the church.
Correct.
So.
But they're just the outpouring of grace. Going back to those spiritual gifts, right? I was talking about earlier, understanding that. They exercised their spiritual gifts at a time when I needed it. I think of Galatians chapter 6, bear your own burdens, but help other people bear theirs too.
Mm-hmm.
When you're looking down the barrel, so to speak, of a particular situation, and you're not getting out of it. Like, this is it. Someone's pulling the trigger and it's coming. Some burdens need to not be bore alone. And in this case, I think that is when I begin to understand one aspect of the church is to help bear those types of burdens of those of Christians. And how do they do that? Well, you do it through love, through caring for one another, through having conversations. I remember my wife can speak more to this than I can, and I think you were there too, and so was Mary Messenger. But just understanding why, right? So, going back to John chapter 9, my wife was, why did God in his sovereignty allow this to occur? Why? And that's hard for a parent to answer because God doesn't owe you an answer. Mm-hmm. He's God. And in his sovereignty, he gets to choose. And so you struggle with that.
But he's loving.
Yes.
And he cares
yes.
about us.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. But you need to know why. Right? Mm-hmm. That eats you alive as a parent when you're dealing with that situation.
Like Job, right?
Yes. Why God did you, go after Job?
He didn't answer why. He's reminded him of who's in
charge. And so both Job and John, those two books were brought up and used to answer. And even though the why, even today, we don't know 100% why. I talked about how other people have been blessed because of this, right? And I've been able to minister because of the condition, my daughter's condition, right? But it doesn't, I couldn't sit here and say, well, this is why my daughter was born with it. And, and because of that, here's the results.
Well, one thing that's safe to say is that everything occurs for God's glory and for our growth.
Yes.
So there is
tremendously.
that aspect.
Tremendously. And within that year time frame, right? Because I told you I went in November, roughly October-November time frame of 2014. I became the Sunday school teacher for the youth. Mm-hmm. But because of Molly and her condition, it began to draw me closer to God. I mean, it was like this
perfect storm.
Yeah, it was such a strong magnet that the only comfort I could find was Scripture. Mm-hmm. Self-help books, all of that stuff. Friends at work that I hope your daughter does well. None of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I shouldn't say none of that. That was good, and it was nice. But it was not nearly as comforting as when you're reading Scripture and you get into the Gospels, right? Excluding John. John's a little different, but in the Synoptic Gospel, and you read what Jesus went through, and you realize God lost his son too. His only child, he lost it too. It's not that God was asking me, to give up my daughter or anything like that. Not something that God has not done himself. I mean, God has literally done everything to demonstrate perfect love to humanity. And when I realized that, it was like a peace just washed over me. Whatever you decide, God, okay, I get it. Whether and what has happened now with life or in death, I will be okay with it because you did it too. You did not. You're not saying you do it, but I'm exempt. That was not the case.
Man. So, as I'm thinking of, let me take it back to whenever y'all were initially in that class. I was like the third wheel in there, but the teachers had known me since I was a kid, even though I had only been at that church for about a year, I think.
Yep.
Or maybe it's 2 at the time. I don't know. But anyway, I showed up. I did my own studies. I shared what was on my heart.
Yeah, like a lot of these, you can't
text
see it on
writing
here,
stuff,
but there was a lot
observation
of these
sheets.
observation sheets already done.
Yeah, and
Outlines.
What I started noticing is, at that time the group was really big because you had married couples, you had singles, you had,
Yep.
and there was other people in the class that were, if you will, I mean, I'm not putting them down when I say this because my brother is special ed, but they were in the same class with my brother in school, and I was seeing that their needs were not being met, and so at that time, after you had found out about Molly and we all went to the hospital and all that stuff and y'all interacted with them, two things kind of happened there. I'm thinking about this is that I started the singles college and careers class at that time.
Yep.
And that's where I got some of the special ed people, and I also got some of the college kids in there. So we had a wide range of things going on. And that was also the same time that you went into being a youth minister.
Yes. Well, the Sunday school teacher starting out.
Yeah, so even though we weren't in the same Sunday school group, we didn't say, "Oh, well, let's only fellowship when we're in a Sunday school group."
Right.
We continued that, like Josh was explaining before. At first, we just studied on the computer, even though we live in the same town, because of the schedule issues. But then eventually, I started riding my bike, and yeah, I didn't even have a car at the time. But then I got blessed with a car and all of that. So I want to talk a little bit about your experiences as a youth minister, Josh.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that? What was the biggest challenges? What would you have done differently?
Ooh, wow.
That type of thing.
Biggest challenge. What did I learn? I learned a lot. I learned that that you progressively increase the academic difficulty of a child, and that
you call them a child. What age were you dealing with here?
Well, I dealt with so it's from, I think it's 6th grade, or no, 7th grade to seniors, 12th grade. That's the age gap. So whatever age group that is, that's the age I was dealing with. And so I guess I spoke way over their heads, to be honest. I did not bring it down to a level that they felt comfortable with, that they enjoyed. I didn't do activities that increased their knowledge but were also fun. I thought that everybody would like doing observation sheets and highlighting scripture and doing those things, and that is somebody, I think that's important, that you know how to do that, right? But I think one of the areas that I failed in was not adapting the lesson and the material to who I was talking to.
Well, I mean, you're a teacher for the military, and you teach power generation.
Correct, I do.
What is the difference between teaching power generation as opposed to teaching
scripture
in the church? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, let's stick with the same audience.
Okay.
But...
yeah. So my job at the time, was teaching 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds for the most part. There was some older folks that would come in, but that was mainly my audience. And the difference is they have to learn that particular information because it's their job. In order to go on and keep getting paid, they have to learn. Whereas the audience at church, they don't have to show up. They're not getting paid to be there. There's not a level of motivation that would require them to be there. Whereas at my job, there is an expectation you learn this material because we're paying you to do it. So there automatically, I made a false assumption that there was a level of motivation at that age to want to do it, and there is for some, and there was for some, but there were some youth members that I'm just here to be here.
But you're also just dumping the information.
I really was.
Feel like you weren't communicating with them.
I was not. I did a terrible job, like I said.
But your strong point is public speaking.
Correct, and I did that fairly well. I mean, I knew how to stand up in front of them, but it ended up just being a lecture. And who wants to get lectured at? Nobody, right? It wasn't.
And deep down, you wanted the interaction. You just didn't know how to bring that about, right?
Correct. So I learned that from a motivational standpoint, intrinsic motivation is not very high in everybody, right? That you are self-motivated to learn a topic or whatever, or that you want to do. And so at some level that we have to take that into consideration when we prepare our lessons, and that we have to make it interesting for the highly motivated, and we also have to make it interesting for the lowly motivated.
Right.
So there was that. There was I learned that that it's important to be on the same page with the parents. If that communication, that these aren't adults like what I was dealing with on my job, right? I didn't have to deal with mom and dad at my work. When I told them to go home and study, they went home and they studied because they were an adult, and that was the expectation. But when you're a youth pastor, they are not adults. They are close to, some of them were 18 years old legally. Yes, they were an adult, but they still lived at home with mom and dad. And they didn't really have the experience of living on their own. They didn't know what that was like. They were almost done with high school. They were looking forward to May 20 whatever, because that was the day they walk across stage to get a diploma. And so being communicating with parents, I learned early on, super important. And that if you get on the same page if the youth pastor and the parents are on the same page, the kids typically follow suit. Because mom and dad provide that, going back to, or paying those people that I work with. And, but mom and dad provide that even at they provide a level of motivation for their youth, that their child. So I would say that definitely I learned those two things.
Okay.
And therefore the church is not military.
Yeah. And so that's good that you went through that experience, and it helped you. It didn't say, oh, you know what, I'm not good at youth ministry, so I should get out of ministry altogether.
Right.
Rather, what it did was, because sometimes you think, or some people would think, well, okay, we'll use youth ministry as a test, and if you fail this test, then there's no way you could be a pastor, or no way you could be a teacher and involved in other ministries and stuff.
Right.
But Pastor Mark's view of that was, he's like, some people are not called to be youth ministers, and so it was kind of interesting because there have been, like Elijah or whatever, he wanted to go further on, and he has done some ministry stuff and like that. And then Ken, that became a pastor. A youth ministry is a good area for you to get that experience, like Pastor Mark talks about. The gift of the small churches is that you get experience. We wear many hats. We get to. So, before we go on to the next subject, what time do you got to go meet with Molly?
I have to be
the
there.
Third daughter.
Yeah, 10:50.
At 10:50. Okay, so you all right? So what happened is, just like what we did with Elijah, you were getting pretty stressed out, right? I mean, you're working, you're doing the youth minister stuff, and so you got relieved on Sunday mornings, and you started coming into my class.
Yes.
All right. Talk about that. I mean, people can go back and watch the videos, and you can see
Yeah.
Josh learning from scratch a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
But he even testifies about when Molly, right before she was going to give her other surgery,
Yeah.
you know, so you can see all that. You can watch how this story unfolds in real time, or at least it was real time at that time. It's recorded time now. But so yeah, talk about that. What was the dynamic like? How did this class change, shift?
Right.
What was going on there?
So in our personal Bible study, right, our hangout time by ourselves, you could be more direct. You could deal with my inefficiencies, my inaccuracies, my immaturities, right, more specifically to me. But in those classes, we were trying to build content because that we started at LOIS. I mean, that was pretty much when the Layman Online International Seminary got started.
Mm-hmm.
So now, instead of dealing specifically with me, now we're talking about general content. We're and through I began to learn the study the book as a whole, down to the passage, right? So that whole and all. I think there was like eight different, if I remember correctly. And
we were using Bauer and Train.
Yes, Bauer, yes. And we were trying to at the time because it would go from one book to the next. We were using the Sunday school material.
Yeah, we would just use whatever passage we had.
It was super challenging. And so, but what it did was it began to expose me more.
Yeah, to a lot of different genres and stuff.
And it began to feed me a lot more. And I began to notice that I was growing. And I was trying to take that same material and go out on Wednesday nights with the youth. And that, again, bringing it from down here to this level,
learning curve.
Yes. And there is that. Because one of the things is how and this is something you taught me, was that one of the ways that you, I guess I kind of knew it, but you more or less solidified it. If you want to learn something, go share it with somebody. Whether you teach it poorly or you share it well, it's going to solidify in your mind. That's
why Christians should share their faith
and
talk about what they're learning in Sunday school, not just say, "Oh, that person only believes the gospel," and stop talking.
Correct. Because what I learned in my own job, actually my real job that I'm earning a paycheck with, is by having to sit there and explain power generation to somebody who knows nothing of power generation, and they're going to ask all those questions like, "Well, why does it work like this? Why does it do that?" Right? Well, I never thought about it. I never thought it worked. I just know that it works that way. You begin to delve into those aspects. And so by going out sharing with the youth, I began to realize a lot of things. And I began to realize, okay, I don't know this very well, and I know this kind of okay, and okay, I got a good grasp on, how to break down a passage, find the main points of a chapter, break the paragraph levels, sentence level, break it down into those, do the outline forms and those types of things. I got down. So that was kind of what I think one of the keys to our success by me going out there was it really began to do ministry preparation, on a layman's level, a non-academic classroom setting. Really low threat. And that's one of the reasons why I love the Layman Online Seminary, is that you learn a lot of the same stuff, right, that they teach in the seminary, hence the Layman's Seminary, right, LOIS. Mm-hmm. But there's no grade threat. There's no, you have to get an A in order to pass this class.
It's just about internal.
Yeah, and you're not dumping thousands and thousands of dollars into a school. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that.
Yeah, sure. And if you want to donate, go ahead.
There's nothing wrong with
Grace giving, that's fine.
Yes, absolutely. But but with people that, they have a desire to learn, maybe their gift is hospitality, or they have a different gift, maybe their gift is not in pastor or teacher, right? But doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn your faith. Doesn't mean that you should not try to, continue to mine out, material and grow.
Because the mission statement is teaching Christians how to study and share their Bible with others.
Exactly. And so that's what I began to really understand, the benefit of LOIS. And just how important it is. And important, not just LOIS is, because, LOIS is important, but there's other ministries that are out there that you've exposed me to, that are doing similar things, right? and that is, having social media, YouTube, Facebook. It's important to help grow, to augment the local body of Christ. So
Okay. So me during that time, I just mentioned this, is I was single at that time. Uh, I was finishing my bachelor's degree, major in sociology, minor in psychology. I was going for a while, and then I had money issues, and so I didn't get to start back to 2014. And so that's whenever I was, interacting with the college group, but I had also these special, what I call slower people, and nothing bad about that. I'm just being reality about it. And so we were able to simplify things at their level. And one of them in particular, he even does ministry. He preaches and does stuff at the missions and things like that.
Yep.
So it was beneficial in that aspect. But yeah, so what started happening is, college kids or people that just turned 18, uh, or these other, basically other people started moving around, growing, and that's success. You shouldn't have them in your class forever. I mean, and they should be sent off to, to do their ministry and stuff like that.
Yep.
And so it eventually became Josh and I.
Yep.
And then that's whenever we started making more of the advanced content.
Yep.
Like, now, one thing that happened, it was kind of an unintentional thing, but the Sunday school group that we had where we all met, initially, the two main teachers, Robert and Debbie, they were sort of like the spiritual parents. Pastor Mark's done a lot of mentoring and stuff like that. But as I focused in on that group, and they were intensely engaged with their group and stuff, I felt kind of isolated, and but Josh has been there with me the whole time. His whole family's been with me all the time, and that's probably his wife calling. But all right, well, just tell her real quick that we're recording, and 1 second, guys. We narrate this broadcast for her.
Doing the interview with Charlie,
and we're recording live.
Bye. Well, when she watches this later, she's gonna know her part.
Yeah, well, that's all right. You can call.
This is a super informal interview, so we're looking for professional.
Yeah.
This ain't it.
So basically, during that time, I'm doing that, and I started seminary officially, even though informally I've been studying DTS books and self-taught, and also influenced by other people, Chafer Seminary and stuff like that. But I started at Southwestern in 2016. God allowed me to have a benefactor and all that. And my benefactor later on withdrew because of me being free grace, her being lordship. But that's all right. God worked through that. So during that time, I was able to help Sherry, a woman that's a doctoral, working on a doctoral degree at Southwestern through the languages. I took Turbo Greek and all that stuff because I've been studying the languages for a while, since like 2006. And so I was able to help in that area, and that's why we started making videos concerning the languages. One, because I wanted to prepare Josh for learning Greek, trying to motivate him. And then whenever we got into learning Greek, what was that experience like, Josh, when you had Dr. Hutchison for Greek at Southwestern?
Well, I can tell you this much: Dr. Hutchison he's good at taking a difficult language. And not nearly as difficult, I don't think, as Hebrew. I think Hebrew, when you're comparing which one's harder to probably learn, I think Greek is easier to learn because I think it's like in an evolution of sense, it's part of our history as part of the English language, right? A lot of, you kind of see this.
Oh, the similarities.
Yes, the similarities in, languages. Whereas Hebrew, it's wow. I haven't even taken it yet, but it's scary looking.
Yeah.
Let me put it that way. But Dr. Hutchinson really helped me. But there is a sense, though, I struggle with online learning. I do. I very much enjoy this type of interaction in a classroom setting. And Charlie provided that, because he'd already been through intermediate Greek, and I think you were taking some
Greek exegetical.
Greek, yes. And so, he exposed me to a lot of YouTube videos where you could sing the Greek alphabet and really began to be able to put in layman's terms, right?
Yeah, because your kids were learning with you.
They were. And the different functions of the Greek words and how verbs decline and all those things. And so um, it was, one of the things I'm going to miss now that I'm moving is just having a fellow seminarian with me here. Obviously, in a local setting, right? Or I can reach out and hang out and do those types of things. Obviously, we can still do this online, but it's just different in the same room. So that was, I think, one of the cool things about going through Greek was doing it. It makes it much more enjoyable when you have someone that can talk it out with you, and relate it to real life. Especially when we started reading, we were going through,
or whenever you had to do sermon preparation and stuff,
and translating, First John.
And Josh has actually preached more than I have at this particular church, even though I teach all the time, because we believe in giving people opportunities, and so I want him to have as many opportunities. That's me being Dr. Dre, and that's being him, Eminem, right now. So, yeah, okay, talk about this real quick, because there's going to be other people that get in seminary and they're going to be married and stuff.
Yeah.
What was your wrong reaction initially when you were in seminary? What did you do that you feel like you shouldn't have done? And you know what I'm alluding to?
I didn't really include my spouse in the learning process.
Because she was homeschooling at the time,
right?
And you were stressed out with work,
yes.
And then you were coming home and getting seminary. And how did you do that initially? I mean,
I secluded myself.
This is your first semester.
So. Yeah, I secluded myself to a bedroom.
Yeah.
And I, everybody had to be quiet. It was just kind of like, instead of just saying, "All right, everybody, we're gonna learn this together," and just letting my wife be part of the process since it's online. She essentially could have got a seminary degree with me without having to actually pay anything, right? So,
and that was a big change for her because, from the time we've been studying from the beginning, she's been involved. We've been in the communication. She's been teaching kids and things like that at the church. So she's always been there. She's my friend as well. And so,
so yeah,
go ahead.
So there was just a sense of like trying to just tackle it like regular schoolwork, right? And there is a difference between seminary level. I realize it's a master level program, but there is a difference between just a general degree, whether it's engineering or psychology. A lot of that material you really can study by yourself and it'll be fine. Whatever. But one of the things that makes the Bible exciting is when you're talking it out, when you're sharing, when you're learning, it becomes alive. It's not just this academic exercise. And remember, I'll go back to what I said before. When you're sharing it, when you're teaching it, it strengthens you more. And so, and also one of the things that I believe is that when you have to discuss it, like when you make an assertion in an argument, someone's like, "Well, back that assertion up." Oh, well, I just said it because that's just what I've always believed. Well, why do you believe it? Like, why do you hold that view? And that's what makes seminary so important, and why it's so important to include people along the way, and not try to just do it through grunt style. We're gonna plow through this and get it done, so I can go be a pastor somewhere. Or so I can go.
Yeah, because you have a testimony, you have a ministry right then and there.
Correct.
And but that was your first semester, and you took too many classes.
Yeah,
because he was like, well, the government's paying for it, so better get
yes.
And so
don't work a 40 to 60-hour job, and then also try to take three classes. That doesn't work very well.
Okay, speaking of work, talk about how you went from power generation to CDC, and as well as the over the flights and stuff.
Oh, okay. So let me clear up some of those acronyms you said. So CDC means Career Development Course. Flight is nothing more than a team lead position. It's just another name for a team. Just a bigger team.
So he's Air Force, so they got to
Right.
be flying, even
Yeah.
though he doesn't actually fly planes.
So yeah, they break things down by using aeronautical terms in most senses.
Mhm.
So I started out as an instructor, and I had a lot of extra time at that time to have a lot of personal one-on-one discipleship with Charles. Obviously, my daughter was born over that time, and so adding another kid to the mix just makes life a little bit more hectic. Those types of things. But as we from 2000 and like I said, 2013 to September of 16, I was an instructor, and they when I say they, my the organization I work in within the Air Force, so that's squadron, they needed to hire a new CDC writer. And basically all it is that job is to make sure that the course, this distance learning course, is good. Whether it's, okay, I got to edit this, I got to update that, those types of things. You're just making sure that it always stays current. You're a developer, right?
Developing curriculum.
We're developing curriculum, just like a teacher develops curriculum for a classroom. That's what I was doing. So they were looking to hire the job, and so I knew Molly needed her third open heart surgery. I didn't want to leave this area. I wanted to have that continued care. So I requested, I put in a request, I submitted a resume, an Air Force level style resume, and they hired me because it just made sense. Why do I pay another guy to move in when we got a guy that's already here? We can just move buildings and come up here and do it. So I did, and what was interesting was after I got hired, my supervisor, he's a pastor himself. He's a bivocational pastor. He teaches or preaches or pastors, excuse me, a small cowboy church where we live. And I remember this was like June of 2017, and he pulled me into his office, and he complimented me. He says, I can't imagine what you're going through, knowing that your daughter could die on the operating table in 3 months. And he said, you're always smiling. You're never down. And we really had a nice Christ conversation. He told me he was a pastor, and we began to talk. And so it was just awesome to be able to do that. And within a month after my daughter's third and final scheduled open heart surgery, a situation occurred within our squadron that was a little nasty, and so they wanted more of a Christian perspective leader to put in his place. And so they came and asked me to do that. And that was not the flight level. That was a section level.
And you were already teaching Green Dot and all that, right?
Yep. I was already doing a lot of some stuff like that. Yep. And so
Green Dot. Tell them what Green Dot is.
Basically. It's a training for
sexual assault or
interpersonal violence.
Okay.
Whether that's
everything.
Whether that's assault sexually or regular assault, just physical abuse, emotional abuse. Those types of things.
So just areas where you're being built in leadership and counseling and all of this. And so this other pastor is recognizing these characteristics within you or skills within you, and it leads to the next,
Correct.
You preached at his church.
Correct. They gave me an opportunity to do that, and that was a lot of fun.
One thing I was thinking about is initially you said that Lacey wanted you to do power generation to keep you in one spot.
Yeah, she wanted me to do a job.
So you wouldn't have to be deploying and all that.
Correct.
How long were you originally only supposed to stay here?
4 years.
4 years, okay?
Yeah.
But because of Molly,
yeah.
Her condition, she can only be in certain locations, right?
Correct.
So God has used this to determine your geographical will, wherever you can go.
Correct.
And it's led you to stay almost, 7 years or...
Almost 7 years, 6 now.
Yeah. And so God's redirected you in that.
Correct.
So talk about the last 6 months, how God has been redirecting you, put the impressions that he's been putting upon your heart, what you think he's doing in your life.
Right, and then after this, I'll unfortunately have to take off. But 6-8 months ago, my wife and I decided, hey, let's get out of active duty. Let's go into the Air National Guard in Michigan. I'll continue to go to seminary. I'll find a job up there. I'll get my wife certified as a nurse. And through a series of events, it just became painfully obvious that that's not where God was. God wasn't opening doors. You know, it wasn't necessarily slamming doors in my face, but it was just wasn't opening doors. And you know, sometimes not now is an answer. You know, it's not an answer you may like.
But you had to get out of your one house.
Yeah, my landlord sold his house, so I had to move out. You know, those types of things, and so I ended up, you know, staying on with active duty.
Got to keep them.
Yeah, so I stayed here, and you know, I knew that the big Air Force eventually was going to move me. I knew that.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know when, and I didn't know where. I just knew that it was ultimately coming down. And so, really tried hard to get prepared for that. And so, about 3 months ago now, about November, the early part of November, the Air Force told me, hey, we need you to go to Korea for a year. And then after that, in about 6-8 months, we'll tell you where you're going to go after that. And so,
but even that turned into an answer of prayer, because the CDC job, in addition to you doing the flight stuff and all of that,
yes,
it was all overwhelming.
really was.
And then Lacey was able to start school,
yep.
you know. But then your truck, you got
yeah, it was
got in a recent wreck, and
yeah, lots of things just occurred. So
prayer requests, and then you're leaving.
Right.
Concerning your trip, you're in Korea. What do you want to accomplish in Korea? How do you want to grow? You know, from that aspect.
From a prayer request standpoint, a couple of things. Pray for opportunities to grow. That are good though. You know, I think there's other. You know, sometimes I find when you talk to people on Facebook, right? It's just they're not going to change. You're not going to change. It's what it all that they're dumb genealogy. Don't argue about senseless stuff from Titus, right? But just pray for good opportunities, good Christian men to be around,
and evangelize.
You know, for good evangelism opportunities. Pray that, you know, family is just protection overall.
Yeah, because you're going to be a part.
Not going to be there. Not just like physical protection for like harm, like, you know, people stealing stuff or hurting them, but just overall, just that nothing seriously go wrong while I'm gone. And then what was the other thing you asked me?
Well, I think you kind of touched it. But Josh, I thank you for this time. You got to go see your daughter.
Yeah.
You're going to surprise her, you know, for having a meal at the school or whatever.
Correct.
But hopefully y'all got an idea about what we're trying to do with the Layman Seminary. I mean, this is more personal because we live in the same area and all of that. But y'all can go back and you can see the interviews with Rafe and stuff, you know, about how he first taught Sunday school, and now he's a pastor at his church, how he learned preaching and all of that. So just go back, look through the playlist, and you can explore some of this journey that you're on, and hopefully you can learn, and then maybe eventually I may get the benefit of interviewing you, and you can talk about how God has blessed you through this ministry. And if God does bless you through this ministry, and if you want to bless us back, then go ahead and donate. You know, is there anything you want to say in closing?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't the last time you guys are going to see me. I hopefully I can start adding some content even while I'm in Korea. You know, we can still, being a board member, still want to contribute to a lot of this ministry. I believe it's super important. LOIS is for everybody. It's from the great to the least. It is literally meant for everybody. If you have a desire, like going back to that motivation, you have a motivation, you want to learn, even if it's small. I only want to learn, you know, how to study the Bible a little bit better. And then, you know, when you get comfortable with that, you want to learn some, you know, advance a little bit more. That's what LOIS is here to do. That's what our passion is, taking a believer in Christ from babyhood to maturity and everybody in between. So,
amen. Thank y'all very much. Be sure to subscribe, hit the bell if you want notifications, give us a thumbs up, share this with others, and let us know what you think. And most of all, please keep this ministry in prayer. God bless.